Hebrew spoken today in Israel is not the same as the Hebrew of the Bible. Biblical Hebrew is related grammatically to Arabic and other Semitic languages, while modern Hebrew is a spoken language that dramatically transformed in the last few hundred years. It is pronounced very differently than Biblical Hebrew probably was. And then there's liturgical Hebrew, used in Jewish prayers. It's scholarly and rabbinic and dates from the Middle Ages. All are written in Hebrew script, which uses letters for consonants but mainly leaves out vowels. That said, prayer books and Hebrew learning textbooks have dots added that mark the vowels. These were invented in the medieval period by a group called the Masoretes. Modern Hebrew, spoken in Israel, is quite distinct from its predecessors. It emerged out of a movement in Eastern Europe in the mid to late 1800s. Men with traditional Jewish educations were moving to larger cities where they aspired to write modern, secular fiction in Hebrew. This was a way to express the idea that Jews could connect to a collective national identity rooted in the distant past, while still participating in the culture of modern Europe, where literature was so important. In writing modern Hebrew literature, they realized they had to find words for concepts that didn't exist in the Bible or rabbinic tradition. So they found biblical words with unclear meanings and gave them new ones. For example, the prophet Ezekiel uses the word chashmal to mean some kind of supernatural, divine, bright, or shining power. Modern Hebrew writers adopted it as the word for electricity. Once Hebrew became a spoken language, it grew rapidly. The Zionist movement, like other national movements of that time, believed that only by speaking a unified national language could a group be a true nation. And in some Zionist leaders' views, the correct national language was not the language Jews spoke at home for generations. Not Yiddish, not Ladino, it was Hebrew, the language of a more ancient Jewish identity. Quick aside, Aramaic, Yiddish, and Ladino, the languages many Jewish communities spoke before Hebrew, all look very similar to Hebrew, as they use the same alphabet. But Yiddish is closer to German, and Ladino is closer to Spanish. Promoters of Hebrew often had very negative feelings about Yiddish, which they called jargon. Very negative. Pro-Hebrew activists once interrupted a Yiddish film screening in Tel Aviv by throwing stink bombs in the theater. A less extreme group, led by Eliezer ben Yehuda, often considered the father of modern Hebrew, founded a Hebrew language committee to come up with new words as needed and answer questions about proper usage. Educators taught Hebrew in schools to immigrants, and in 1925, Hebrew University was established in Jerusalem. Even before Jewish statehood, new generations of Jewish immigrants to Palestine began to speak Hebrew, and as they did, the language changed. People invented new words, new grammatical structures, and borrowed words from other languages, like telephone. Because many early speakers natively spoke Yiddish, Polish, or Russian, lots of grammatical patterns and terms from these languages made their way into Hebrew. And because of the influence of Palestinian Arabs and Middle Eastern Jews, Hebrew also has borrowed a lot of Arabic terms. Sometimes official promoters of Hebrew pushed back. They published newspaper columns trying to correct common errors or offer Hebrew words for foreign ones. But many of these incorrect usages became part of the language. Jewish communities around the world developed different pronunciations. For instance, the letter ayin is treated like an aleph by many native speakers and left silent, but it shows up in Mizrahi accents as a guttural sound, more like Arabic. Ashkenazi Jews have a different pronunciation than Sephardi Jews. Is it a talit or a talis? In Israel, speakers of modern Hebrew can usually understand biblical and rabbinic Hebrew, and they learn texts in them in public schools. But they don't necessarily understand all the nuances. For instance, when God tells Abraham to sacrifice a 3-year-old calf, the Bible uses the term eglah meshuleshet. But in modern Hebrew, the word meshuleshet means triangular. So to a modern reader, this translates as triangular calf, which wasn't 100% the original meaning. Hebrew has always developed in contact with other languages, because Jews have always lived in contact with other groups of people, in the diaspora and in Israel. A great example is how Israelis end phone calls, as we'll do right now with a mashup of Hebrew, Arabic, and English. Tov! Yalla, bye.